Paddi, or Patrick. I am a monitor engineer, so basically no one knows what I do until I don't do it. Today we are in Munich with the band TOTO, the Africa guys, Hold the Line. I started in this industry about 12 years ago, in 2007, as an apprentice in a rental company close to Hamburg called Profi-Musik, or PM Blue nowadays. And I actually started mixing jazz bands and classical stuff, theater. And after a while, like when I finished my apprenticeship, I was tempted to do some more rock and roll. The first band I ever toured with was a German pop rock band called Revolverheld. I think I did monitors for like a year. I did Lacrimosa, which is a Swiss and German gothic metal band. And then the first bigger international band I was working for, or started to work with, in 2013, maybe 2012, was In Flames. And it's still my main gig, still my boys. And after a while, I got the chance to work with bands like Alter Bridge and Korn, and now we are here in Munich with TOTO, which is crazy, because as I said, it's the 40th anniversary tour. I'm 31 years old, so this band is 10 years older than I am. There's quite a few differences in mixing a metal band like In Flames or Korn and TOTO, because their approach or their demand is they want to sound like a live mixed and mastered DVD, which is not necessarily easy to do, especially if you have like 66 microphones on stage, a lot of bleed, and not always the same input signals, because stuff changes. Today we are in a tent. Sometimes, and most of the time, we do open air shows during the summer. Sometimes we do arenas, so that is quite of a challenge. I would like to show you around on stage, like all the instruments, the microphones, and walk you through my file, and maybe teach you how to do it. I don't know. So for me, for mixing any band basically, the most important stage or the most important part in the signal chain is the input source. In this case, the drum set, or actually any instrument, and the microphones. First of all, you need a well-tuned drum set, because if it sounds like card boxes, there's very little that you can make out of it, right? So if you have a proper tuned drum set and good fitting, or the best sounding microphones for this source, this is half of your mix already. On the drum set, we have mainly Earthworks microphones. We have SR20s, SR25s, SR40s, DM20s on the toms. We have the Beyer 201s on the snare drum, on the snare top. The bottom microphones are SM57s. And it is a really, really well-tuned drum set, which is the most important thing. Because if the drum set is not tuned well and the tones are not great, it doesn't really matter what microphone you use, right? So we spent a couple days or quite some time to figure out what microphones to use. Like what microphone sounds best with the source. And well, here we are. Another really important or good tip actually is the snare drum is usually the loudest instrument on a drum kit. And you don't only have it in your snare top and snare bottom mic, but you also have it on your hi-hat microphone, on your tom microphones, on your ride microphone, and also on your overhead microphones. So in order to have the most phase coherent version of the snare drum, or the best sounding version of the snare drum, is when you measure the time that the sound needs to go from the snare drum to the snare top microphone, and from the snare drum to the overhead microphones, and use input delays. The outcome of that is a better sounding snare drum, thicker and more clear sounding snare drum. Try that. If you have the opportunity to use Pro Tools, or maybe the Waves in-phase plugin, or whatever you use on your console, try that. It really helps, and it clears a lot. Same thing as with the drums applies to the percussion. For me, the congas are his most important instrument, because that's what he plays mainly during the show. So the congas are input delayed to the other overhead microphones, like the toy microphones that we have over here. Also Beyer, I think 930 they're called. And the bongos, which is a 201 as well. So I have a couple input delays for this as well. And the same thing happens. It clears up the mix a little bit. It gets tighter and less phase problems, really. We have 4 congas, we have 2 bongos, we have 2 timbales, we have the bass drum, we have a gong, we have chimes, we have, God knows, I don't even know what all those things are called. So on guitars, we are fairly traditional, I would say. We have tube amps, Bogner Helios, I think they are called. We have SM57s and a typical or classic stereo setup. He has a bunch of pedals, a lot of stereo effects like delays and phasers, and an insane guitar sound. I mean, Steve Lukather, how cool is that? So the second important thing for me after all those instruments and the microphones is obviously the mixing console. I think it's no surprise that I'm still on an Avid console. That is my go-to desk or company. I could talk a lot about the sound quality and cool features, and almost everyone says the same. I mean, of course, the sound quality is great, you know. But to me, it's more like I'm so used to this console. I know it inside out. I know every little button that makes me super fast on the console. So whatever is needed on stage, I know exactly where to do stuff. I have the muscle memory. So usually once someone turns around and tells me to turn up, I don't know, the kick drum, I'm there because I know what's going on. That makes me fast on the console. This is the main reason why. Second reason is their support is just great. You know, usually, I mean, a console never goes bananas on a Monday morning at 11 a.m. Usually this happens in, you know, Takatuka 10 minutes before the show, and you need to reach out and get someone on the phone. And they are superb in that. Whether it's Chris or Rob or Ansgar or Ryan or the guys at the hotline, you can always get someone on the phone. They have super fast solutions, ideas, or just a simple good luck. Another great feature that I use quite heavily is plugins, obviously. Not really to shape any sound, so I'm not really using any channel strips or much of compression, but tools like the Waves PSE, the primary source expander, enhancer, something like that. It is somehow like a gauge so you can clean your inputs. So on the congas, the primary source expander, you can set the threshold, the range, and also like a key input or sidechain input. And it helps cleaning the channels up. And I have like 20 plugins in my signal chain, I guess. For congas, for bongos, I use it for vocals, I use it for the guitar, I use it for the acoustic guitar. So on this tour, I have 12 stereo in-ears and 3 wedges, stage left, stage right, and on the percussion riser. That is all the band. I have a tech mix with all the talkbacks. And basically everyone hears everything. It's like a studio mix. Everything has the same stereo panorama, everyone has the same inputs, but their own instrument on top, slightly. That is basically what's going on with TOTO. And as I said, they want to have it sound like a mixed and mastered live DVD. It's like working with those guys that have been top-notch producers and session guys and, you know, insane career. Like on one side, it's very, very easy to mix them because they know exactly what's going on. They know how to achieve their sounds and how to get their tones. But on the other side, or other hand, they're very, very particular and very, very protective about what they're doing. If that's, I don't know if that's the word to say that. And with protective, I mean it's like very, very important for them that it's the same quality every day at any given time, whether it's an open air show, indoor, stadium, arena, or a small club gig. It doesn't matter. And that is the part that makes our job a little bit tougher. Because, of course, a tent like today sounds different than a stadium. And even though they use in-ears, it affects the sound. And that's where I, you know, sit down with my Pro Tools and dial it in a little bit. I change output EQs, sometimes compression, depending on what's needed on the venue. And also a big factor is the PA system, obviously, because, you know, all the new PA systems like the GSL, E15, they're cardioid. Some PAs, they're not. So they're kind of like omnidirectional, and you have to adapt because those guys, they don't like low end or like the heavy low end. So I have to cut this on my in-ear, sometimes I have to add it. That is my daily routine, my daily job, and that makes it tough. But other than that, it's awesome to mix them because all the input sources are great. Like I said, good sounding drum set, good sounding congas and percussion, good sounding guitar tones, very, very good singers, perfect pitch. It's great. We are using Shure wireless systems. We have the new P10R Plus belt packs. We have Axient wireless microphones. That's just great. It's great sounding equipment, especially in the new packs. The stereo width is great. That gives me a little more room to place all my instruments, a little bit of depth to it. It's super reliable. It works great with the workbench. So that makes our daily job a little bit easier. And well, the last stage of the signal chain after the inputs, the mixing console, the wireless systems, is obviously the earphones, headphones, whatever you want to call them, and the wedges. I am a JH Audio guy. I use JH Audio for all my bands. And the speakers I have on stage, whenever I have the opportunity to take my own wedges out on a tour, is D&B. No questions. Because I think, especially the transition between JH Audio and D&B is so great that I do not really have to use different EQs for my kick drum, snare drum, vocals, whatsoever. I can just send the same input source to the output and it sounds great. They're reliable, there's so much headroom, it's just great. It makes my life easy.
I'm Ken Freeman, and I'm the front of house engineer with the band TOTO. I've been with them for about 10 years now. And prior to that, I was working with Luke's band, so that's how I got the job with TOTO. They're a wonderful band to mix and very challenging because there's a lot of instruments on stage. I believe we had, overall, with the talkback mics and everything, over 80 inputs. And so there's a lot going on from the stage and a lot of careful mixing that has to be done to make things happen in a scenario like today. We're in a circus tent. So I can't get everything to speak like you would on a record in a live situation. So I have to make choices. And like yesterday, we were outdoors, so I was able to have a little fatter sound. I was able to pump up the subs and make things a little bigger. Now that we're in a circus tent, things will be, filtered more, to try to get the same type of resonance. Also, we have a really soft volume level today. It's only 95 dB. So this show I like to run somewhere between 97 and 99, peaking at 100, A-weighted. So I'm running a couple of dB lower than normal, so that also is pretty challenging. It's much harder to control the dynamics, keep the vocals on top, but still have enough support from the other instruments. I do a lot of rides. I do not mix in a stagnant way. A lot of engineers like to rely on compression, but I'm all hands-on. So because TOTO, especially the vocals, sometimes there'll be vocals that the background singers are the leads, and then there's one lead singer, then another lead singer. So I'm constantly jumping around and rebalancing everything. There's a lot of little keyboard hits that have to be ridden up. There's a lot of guitar solos, a lot of guitars come down on the verses, that type of thing. So it's quite challenging mixing, but that's the reason I like it. It's not a set it and forget it kind of mix at all, and it's going to be different every day depending on the venue. I went back to the profile. I started mixing this band on a profile, and last year I toured on the S6L, which is a wonderful console. Because I didn't really have a chance to go for training on it before this run, I decided to go back to the profile just from familiarity because we had zero rehearsal time. And so I'm also not carrying a system technician. It's not a full production run. This is easier for me to handle in a festival situation. I like it. It's a workhorse. It's got more of a punch than like other consoles do. And I find it to work better for rock and roll than some other desks do, But I'm also helping it out a lot. I have some analog gear over here, which helps me quite a bit. I like having analog stuff just so I can grab a few pieces of gear where I need to and have knobs as opposed to trying to dial everything on the desk. And so I put a distressor. This goes on my lead vocalist, Joe. And he has a very dynamic voice, and he also has a voice that has a lot of 2K energy in it. And he can go from a warm tone to a very bright tone very quickly. And the distressor, by playing with the attack, I'm able to dial that in on a song-by-song basis. So I'm constantly twiddling on the distressor and on the Avalons. I have C4s across Luke and Joe, or C6s, I'm sorry, across Luke and Joe, which help with the proximity effect a lot. But still, I grab the bass and low mid knobs a lot. And I ride them down for different songs during the show. Certain times, if the guys are singing in different manner, I'll hit the attack faster on Luke and try to choke down some of those things that he pops out with. And then I'll open it up for other songs. And I just like having the knobs. I'm not using Joe's compressor on here unless I really need to, and I just kick it in. But generally, the distressor's handling all the compression. And then down here, this is a company, and they sent me a creamliner. It's a company called Sonic Farm. And I tried this out in Canada, and I really liked it. I was trying before to emulate analog master bus compression and transformer sounds using plug-ins on the Universal Audio. And it seems to work okay at 48K, but 96, it was getting a little flaky with the Spiff bus. So I decided to go all analog with my master bus insert. And this is a transformer, and it's a really nice unit. It's got two different kinds of transformer on the input stage. And then on the output stage, it also has a solid state output or a transformer output. And these two knobs are similar to a Pultec. They're basically shelves. There's a low shelf and a high shelf, and so you can get a little air on top, or you can get a little subsonics, which helps out this older desk, which doesn't have quite the fat mix bus that the new desks have, you know. And then this is the Manley Varimu, and this is my master compression across the whole mix. I don't use a lot of it. I only use half to 1 dB of compression. But it's enough to give some glue to the mix and hold things together. And then on the console, you know, it's just mainly smack. There's some C6s in there. I like this a lot. This Renaissance de-esser is phenomenal for catching piercing frequencies in the high mids. And a lot of people don't use it for that. A lot of people use it straight as a de-esser. But for me, it controls that energy that singers have when they sing in the highest registers and belt, and it gets hard sounding. And so this is my little warm-up Joe compressor. C6s are just doing basic overall compression, you know, and I have those on every vocal, but I don't hit them very hard. I mainly use them to control the low mids when they get close to the microphone, the proximity effect. Underneath, I have Universal Audio, Apollo. And then these are two computers. This one runs Pro Tools only, and this one runs all of my effects, and it runs Smart, and it runs house music and everything else. So this is my main computer. This is my Pro Tools computer, and it just attaches with that interface. And what I do is over here I use a program called MainStage, and in MainStage I have every song programmed with different effects. So as I change patches on the console, this changes also. And so I'm able to make certain songs sound more 80, other ones sound more modern by changing drum reverbs. I'm able to use longer reverbs on ballads and whatever I want to do. I mean, it's just open book at this point. So I have a scene for each song, and it changes with MIDI patch changes, and I'm able to use high quality effects. Like there's a Lexicon 480 in here, which I really love. And so I use this for my drums, my drum rooms, and I use it for my vocals plate and also for the hall. And then I also have an EMT 250 that I use for snare reverb. And then I have an AMS, UAD AMS, that I use for that 80s non-linear sound that a lot of the songs have from TOTO. I haven't been mixing the TOTO DVDs, but most of them I'm recording because they're my mics and my system generally, you know. So we usually have another company come in and supplement, especially with audience mics. But like on the last DVD we did, the 40th Trips Around the Sun, we didn't use any of their tracks. We used all of my, off the S.E.A. we had 96K tracks, and they were nice and clean, and we ended up using those as opposed to the other company.
My name is Daniel O'Brien. I am TOTO's lighting designer, director. This version of the tour, we're carrying a floor package, and we're doing several festivals. Lighting changes almost every day. The trick is to try to, give the band something consistent, something that they have become used to. When TOTO started out, obviously, lighting technology was nothing like it is today. So today what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give them again, something consistent in the floor package that we're bringing so that the band sees, some of the same things. And what I'm doing with the overhead package is just basically trying to give them, a very dynamic rock and roll show. And that's what I, try to do every day. Well, this is my first time using the Icon Beam, actually. Although it's not a new fixture, but it's my first time using it, and it's impressive. I managed to burn the carpet on the stage already, so that's that's something. That's rock and roll enough. I'm using Best Boys on this, which I don't have a lot, which are very nice. I've got a fair amount of Vipers, which are great, and a lot of sort of colored strobes instead of traditional strobe lights. I'm seeing a lot of LED strobes with color and things like that. So I've adapted, a little bit to that. But I'm enjoying them very much because then they become much more functional that way. You've got a color wash and you've got a strobe, which is nice. I'm using a Grand M8 full-size 3. My first time out with this particular desk. I'm very happy with the desk. They've made several improvements over the previous version of the desk. My lighting is definitely rock and roll lighting. I'm absolutely doing this. I'm absolutely busking this show with a general setup basically for each song. What I like to do is keep my options very open. I've determined sort of the color palette that I like to use for this group. And I have it all so that it's available very quickly at my fingertips, and so that I don't have to worry about anything, a lot of button pressing, other than just feeling the show itself and just trying to make the show feel like I think it should.